Hello everyone, this is Fall of Alexandria 641, early Muslim expansion. This was video 6, I think. Not counting the first one, which was broken down into like 9 parts or whatever, but let's get into this one. Let's see what this one's about. I bet you there's a battle in Alexandria.
Even before recorded history began in the region, Egypt had a close relationship with its sub-Saharan neighbour to the south, Nubia, and they were about to be the next targets of the Caliphate's ambitions. When the Muslims finally managed to crack the Roman Babylon fortress, it unlocked the gate to the remainder of Egypt, so Emperor Heraclius prepared to continue his desperate defence of Egypt at the second city of his empire, Alexandria. Welcome to our video continuing the Islamic invasions of the 7th century, the Siege of Alexandria, and the campaign against Nubia. 2021 is just starting and we've decided to spend more time this year on self-development. If you want to join the fall of Babylon to Rashidun forces in December 640, Amr ibn Alas kept his army stationed in the area for a while, dispatching word to Caliph Umar of his triumph and requesting permission to continue the conquest towards Alexandria. This pause also gave his army a much-needed rest. In Constantinople, the elderly and sickly Emperor Heraclius reacted to the latest Muslim victory by ferrying several thousand more imperial reinforcements to Egypt over the Mediterranean. They had clear orders: protect Alexandria at all costs. Upon making landfall at the provincial capital, these reinforcements and the existing Alexandrian garrison, possibly under Theodorus's command, began working to strengthen the city fortifications and fanning out to defensible positions en route to the city. Reports of these preparations made it south to Amr. At about the same time, a messenger arrived from Arabia with the Caliph's order to advance and seize Alexandria. So, leaving a small garrison to hold down Babylon and keep the Memphis region in check, Amr gave orders for his men to break camp. The 12,000-strong Muslim army headed northwards in February 641. Marching along the Nile Delta's western fringe, immediately adjacent to a familiar desert climate, the Muslims overcame light Roman resistance at Tanut and Qaum Sharik before turning northwest away from the river. After subsequent...
I just want to ask, okay, since my man Khalid's gone, R.I.P., who's the next name that I should be on the lookout for? I'm not going to say who's the next Khalid, but who's the next person that I'm going to just see kicking ass, and I'm going to say, yep, there's my guy. That's the guy I'm going to watch now, because I haven't found that one yet. He's yawned right in my face, huh? I'm just asking.
Subsequently capturing Salteus, Amr then won a bloody victory at Kion, just 12 miles away from Alexandria, and chased the defeated Roman forces to the city's eastern approach.
I got cold hands.
The march to the sea had taken just 22 days. Wow. Alexandria had been built by Alexander the Great and his Ptolemaic successors on a relatively narrow strip of land, bounded to the north by the Mediterranean Sea and in the south by Lake Mayotte. Since the main transportation routes ended east of the city, the only truly vulnerable approach was the northeastern one. The Muslims made camp outside weapon range and then deployed for battle, slowly advancing towards the recently reinforced Alexandrian walls. Unfortunately for Amr, such a careless preliminary move allowed the expert Roman artillerists to disrupt and scatter his units with volley after volley of massive catapult stones. This bombardment sent Amr and his warriors back to camp, dodging missiles all the way.
What was the average size catapult? Like the ball that the catapult threw, or the whatever you want to call. What was the average size, or how big could it have been? And I mean these Romans now that are firing us, and I'm not asking you to find the actual dimensions, but if you could find an average, like, because I'm trying to envision standing there and just seeing one of them come shooting out of a fortified area and just looking up at it and thinking, that's coming right towards me. So I'm curious to how big it was and how fast were they. Like, could you sit there and watch it and think, yeah, I got at least 4 or 5 minutes? That's an exaggeration. Or were you thinking, start running? Sorry.
Attacks continued with intermissions, and in these intermissions, the Roman defenders would instead launch sorties out of the city and attack the Muslim army, aiming to throw it back and end the siege.
What are you doing?
Despite the ferocity and competence of the men carrying them out, these attempts failed consistently and ended up being pushed back into the city. At some point during the first months of indecisive action, the defenders sortied out against a section of the front manned by the Arabian Mahra tribe, and a fierce clash began. It seems to have concluded as an indecisive draw, but the Mahra lost a man whose head was subsequently cut off and taken away by the Romans, much to the Arabs' fury. The next morning, the same thing happened. A Roman officer, probably made confident by the previous day's action, launched an attack on the Mahra, but this time the outcome was very different. After being killed in the fighting, his head was taken by the Arab warriors and used as a bargaining chip to get their comrade's head back.
So this is the fall of Alexandria, 641, the Battle of the Heads, apparently.
After a brief negotiation, both sides made an exchange and buried their kinsmen with honours.
Wow. Exchanging heads.
At the height of summer, around 2 months after Ammar initially constructed his camp, the Sami tribal commander decided to shift it forwards for reasons which we are not aware of. However, as his forces were moving, the Roman defenders sensed an opportunity and mounted a daring cavalry attack, which nevertheless was easily repulsed. A reckless Muslim cavalry detachment set out in hot pursuit of the fleeing Romans and actually got inside the city just before the defenders could close the gates behind them. Heavily outnumbered, they fought a fierce skirmish at the so-called Church of Gold, in which some of them were killed and the rest were pushed out of Alexandria.
They should have never went in there. I understand in the heat of the battle, you're charging in, you're not thinking about it, you're just, and then you get in, and you're like, yeah, we got in it. And then those gates close behind you, and you're not as confident as you were, because now you're stuck. Man, that sucks. I wonder if the Romans did that on purpose, kind of went out and then, oh no, we're retreating, and we're gonna, let me say that again. Oh no, we're retreating. I said, oh, retreating. I don't think they did, but
Heraclius, who maintained constant contact with Alexandria, was all too aware that the Muslims were gaining momentum. Worried that all of Egypt was about to be lost, he gathered a formidable army across what remained of the empire, together with equipment and supplies. Just before this giant emperor-led relief armada was about to set sail, Heraclius died in Constantinople at the age of 66, leaving his eldest sons, Constantine III and Heraclius, as joint heirs.
Joint heirs never works out. And I don't know anything about this, but I have a feeling those two are going to start fighting each other. Hey, I'm doing a video, you two. Shut your faces. Hey, shut up. Goddamn kids. I have a feeling that those two are going to fight each other. And then the Muslims are going to come in and conquer some territory because those two are not going to get along. I'm just throwing that up there.
Initiated a round of imperial politicking which didn't allow the empire to react at the worst possible moment.
Oh.
As senior emperor, Constantine attempted to get a hold of the increasingly dire situation in Egypt. His untimely death only a short time later derailed those plans entirely.
How did he die, though? Was it natural causes? By a knife to the throat repeatedly? Like, how did he die? Okay.
If that wasn't bad enough, some Byzantine generals, including one Valentinus, took up arms in support of Constantine's son, Constans II, believing that Heraclius' mother, Martina, had poisoned Constantine. This dynastic struggle would not conclude until late 641, ensuring that no reinforcements would be sent to Alexandria.
Wow.
Politicking also infected the soldiers defending the Egyptian capital, causing infighting and massive morale loss. When the siege had dragged into its 6th month with no sign of ending,
6 months.
Ammar received a letter from the Caliph chastising him for taking so long. So, after conferring with his generals, Ammar selected the experienced Ubadah bin as-Samit to lead an assault. In late October 641, the entire Muslim army assembled for midday prayer and then deployed for battle. Then, led by Ubadah, Ammar's forces finally captured Alexandria by storming a gate near the Church of Gold. Of Muslim achievements to this point, 20 years since Hijrah, the Siege of Alexandria ranked alongside events such as Yarmouk and Al-Qadisiyah in its importance. The Caliphate acquired an invaluable naval base, while diminishing Roman sea power, and conquered a land of immense riches and culture. Perhaps most importantly for the future, possession of Egypt allowed the Islamic armies to penetrate even further south and west into Africa. The wealth, beauty, and luxury of Alexandria ensnared the Arabs and their general in equal measure, but Ammar could not make his headquarters there without the Caliph's permission. So he sent an emissary back to Medina, asking Umar whether or not he could stay in the metropolis. Unfortunately for the conqueror of Egypt, one of the Rashidun ruler's many quirks was the absolute contempt and distrust in which he held large expanses of water, such as the Nile. The single occasion on which Umar allowed one of his commanders, a governor of Damascus known as Muawiyah, to embark on a naval operation, the entire force had been destroyed. So Umar refused Ammar's request, explaining, "I do not wish the Muslims to take up their abode where water intervenes between them and me in winter or summer." Disappointed, Ammar moved south and laid the foundations for his new city, the first capital of Islamic Egypt, Misr al-Fustat, the city of the tents, or Fustat for short. The country.
Does that city still exist today? He doesn't like water separating him from his other leaders. That seems like a weird. I mean, I understand the rationale. You had people going on water, blah blah blah. I understand that, but I don't know. That just seems like a weird kind of a, what is it, quirk? Is that the word I'm trying to say? But hey, I'm not in his shoes, so I don't know what he's been through.
The country's new governor was occupied for the next few months attending to the administration of the Caliphate's newest territory. As 641 gave way to 642, Ammar settled grievances among his warriors and the locals, revitalized previously abandoned pieces of infrastructure, including canals, and even dispatched food aid to famine-ridden Medina at Umar's request. To extinguish any remaining embers of resistance against Muslim rule, Ammar sent out 3 columns to the areas around Damietta, Heliopolis, and Fayum, while a 4th ensured that the remainder of Lower Egypt was obedient. All of them had an easy time, accomplishing their task without bloodshed by mid-642. With Egypt firmly in his grip, the adventurous Ammar ibn Alas turned his focus towards a Christianized Nubian kingdom called Mercuria to the south. Mercuria, ruled by a king called Kalidurit from his great citadel at Dongola, was a rising and expansionist power in sub-Saharan Africa. In fact, its monarch had only recently annexed a former regional rival, Nubia. A literate society with a vibrant culture of their own, the Nubians were renowned as hardy, ferocious warriors. In particular, their formidable reputation for horsemanship and archery was known around the Mediterranean world.
Okay, so this is going to be an interesting battle.
Are you tired of spending way too much money at coffee shops or sitting in drive-thrus? Today I'm going to show you how to make a chocolate frappuccino that is delicious, easy to make, and
I don't visit those, so sorry. I'm chilly.
At some point during the scorching African summer of 642, Amma sent his cousin Uqba bin Nafa and 20,000 horsemen into Nubia, where they quickly began suffering at the hands of the local inhabitants. Unable to resist the Muslims in a pitched battle, lethal but unarmoured Makurian archers, mounted and on foot, launched constant hit-and-run attacks which gradually sapped Uqba's strength before darting back unharmed into the wilderness. As the Islamic army pushed deeper into Nubia and encountered guerrilla-style attacks in increasing numbers and ferocity, the hawk-eyed Makurian archers would frequently call out to the Arab invaders, "Where would you like me to put an arrow in you?" When one of the Muslim warriors skeptically pointed at an area of their body, our sources state that an arrow would indeed strike there, injuring or killing the man in question. When Uqba and his diminished forces finally neared the Makurian capital at Dongola, they found a smaller enemy army of around 10,000 waiting for them, forced into defending their central city by Uqba's movements. Eager to destroy the Nubians' fighting potential now that he had them all in one place, Amma's cousin began arraying his troops for battle. As the Muslim advance towards Kalidurit's line began, it was almost instantaneously hit by an utterly merciless barrage of Makurian arrows that...
I'm gonna go on a limb and say that the Nubians, they seem to be really accurate with their bow and arrow. And in a time before weapons, like before guns, bow and arrows were the weapon. They were the guns, And how would you defeat that? I guess you would have to try to rush them as fast as you could. But at the same time, they're probably going to have units behind, that would be able to fight. I don't know why I just did this as though this is what they're doing. They're standing there with their fists like, okay, let's go. Let's bring this on. But man, they seem to be really devastating.
That struck the attacking army with pinpoint accuracy. Uqba's assault was stalled in its tracks by the hail of missiles just as soon as it began, and his soldiers, 250 of whom had lost at least one eye in the battle, suffered terribly. Unable to close with the Nubian archers and swiftly losing men to grievous injury, Uqba withdrew his warriors from the field. Forever after, Muslims would call the Nubians the Archers of the Eye because of their penchant for loosing arrows with deadly accuracy into the eyes of their enemies.
I would say that's an enemy you probably respect.
Unwilling to continue such a difficult campaign in a land which promised them little gain from plunder or future land, the Muslims continued retreating all the way back to Fustat. Although not exactly a decisive defeat, an army of the Caliphate had been defeated for one of the first times in history. After a month or two of recuperation, Amma assembled his armies from their bivouacs and personally led them west into the desert during September of 642. After a month of hard marching, the Muslims eventually arrived at a still Roman city known as Barca, which, having no arrangements for defense, quickly surrendered. This was the first act of the decades-long Islamic conquest of a region which is now called the Maghreb. Amr had Uqba ride inland from the coast, where he successfully pacified the area of arid desert between Barca and Sawila without violence. The poor population quickly proved law-abiding and reliable in their payment of taxes, so Amr decreed that part of the revenues coming in from the entire Fezzan region would be spent to alleviate poverty there. Then in spring...
That's what, I mean, if you're going to take over an area, take care of the people, and you can win them over, especially if they've been treated like garbage. And it seems like that's what they do. The Muslims invade, and then they spread that wealth. And man, if you're constantly paying, and then you get, I'll say, new ownership, you know what I'm saying? And they come in and they're like, no, you use that on you. You're gonna be like, hey, where have you been? Please stay a while. Let me bake you a cake. You're gonna love those people.
In 643, the Muslim army advanced on and blockaded the Roman garrisoned city of Tripoli. Amr set up his camp on an elevated section of terrain east of the city and waited, realizing that such a coastal settlement could be navally resupplied for an extended period of time. Lacking siege weapons, he also lacked the ability to reduce fortifications. After 2 months of relative inactivity, 8 of Amr's warriors galloped off west of the city for a hunting trip. When these hunters began making their way back around noon, the sheer heat of the day led them to ride back along the coast. All of a sudden, they came upon Tripoli's western boundary, where the city wall met the sea, and discovered that the section was only thinly protected. In a display of bravery or foolishness, these 8 intrepid opportunists used Tripoli's vulnerable flank to infiltrate their way inside the city. Before the defenders even realized what was happening, the Muslim group reached the city center and began slaying enemies. Such unexpected violence triggered a bout of extreme panic within the city, both among the civilians and Tripoli's defending forces. In fact, a large number of the armed soldiers within the city believed that a large enemy contingent had somehow gotten inside, and because of this, took refuge aboard a number of anchored ships in the harbor. Amr caught wind of the pandemonium taking place inside the city, and so quickly set about exploiting the weakness. Arraying his warriors with haste, the Arab commander ordered a full-scale assault to scale Tripoli's enfeebled walls. In yet another action of which we have left no detail, the Muslims managed to get inside and joined their 8-strong vanguard.
Wow.
Unwilling to fight any further, the Roman defenders took whatever they could carry and departed aboard their ships, leaving Tripoli to Amr's army. While most of the army stayed in the city for a while, the conqueror of Egypt sent a swift detachment of cavalry about 40 miles to the west, where the population of a town known as Sabrata were still carefree. They had heard rumors of fighting for neighboring cities, but it would be a while before the war reached them, if ever. The next morning, Sabrata's Roman guards opened the gates of their city, and its population began leading animals out to graze for the day. Unfortunately for them, it was at this moment that the Islamic cavalry unit struck completely by surprise, getting through the gates, killing the majority of the defending troops, and sacking the town. With that done, they returned to Tripoli. Having succeeded...
They didn't take control of it though? They just went in and killed everyone and then killed the warriors or whatever and then left? Interesting. Okay.
Amr longed for more and eagerly penned another letter to Caliph Umar containing both the good news of victory and a request to continue his conquest. This was rejected, as the Caliph was worried about overextending his forces. And this time, there was no loophole or clever ploy that Amr could use to bypass Umar's decree and continue his relentless campaigning. Therefore, after allowing his army to recuperate in Tripoli for a time, Amr travelled back to Fustat and remained there, quietly administering his Egyptian domain, and dealing with whispers of future rebellion. Although Umar had spared the rest of Byzantine Africa for the time being, that wouldn't last long. However, as the combat in North Africa was winding down, the situation on the Persian front was becoming heated again. In the next episode, we will return to the Muslim-Sassanid War, so make sure you are subscribed.
That was good. The guy that I'm looking to, and that was the UQBA. Oh, I'm gonna butcher his name. I almost don't want to say it out of respect. I'm going to, clearly, because, why wouldn't I? Oh, I forgot how to pronounce it. Or was it UBQA? Oh, son of a bitch, I forgot. Yukba. That one guy. That's going to be the guy I focus on now. Unless you have someone else that I should look at. Unless there's someone, if there's someone coming down the road, don't fall for this guy yet. You got someone else coming, Kris. Well, I like that. I'm going to end the video here, but I just want you all to know that I love washing my hair with freshly squeezed pigeon butter. You're welcome. Like and subscribe.